All right. Welcome, everyone. This is the traffic calming meeting for 14th Street and Greenwood Avenue. It's January 8th, 2024, 5:30 p.m. This is a virtual only meeting that is being recorded and will be posted to NDOT's YouTube page afterwards. So if any neighbors weren't able to attend tonight, anyone wants some additional information, they can be referred there. And then we'll also have our contact information available. To get us kicked off, I'll introduce myself. My name is David Greaves. I'm working with NDOT as the design engineer on these two projects. We're having one joint meeting for both of them because they are adjacent and have similar design considerations. But they are two separate projects in NDOT's book. We'll kind of cover the details of what that means a little later. Also on the phone with me is Abigail McCown. Abigail, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, I'm Abigail McCowan. I work here at Kimley Horn and sit right beside David. So just if you have any questions, just let me know in the chat and I'll let David know.
Yeah, to that point, we are going to cover a good amount of information this evening. I'll pause for questions at a few specific times so we can sort of revisit anything we've covered so far. And then there will be, as much time as we need for questions or discussion after the presentation as well. So with that, I'll just go ahead and jump right in. First things first, what is traffic calming? This is a NDOT program that focuses on residential streets. Primarily physical solutions are their bread and butter. So we've seen speed cushions, delineators, things like that. And the primary goal is speed reduction. So that's taking streets where cars are going quite fast. Maybe there's a lot of them, and trying to reduce the speed that they're going for safety purposes. There are 3 E's of traffic calming, just to recap a little bit. Those are education. That's kind of what we're doing now, talking to residents, emphasizing the importance of driving safely. There's enforcement. That is primarily up to the Metro Nashville Police Department. So it's not quite NDOT's area to mess with. And then finally, big, bold, underlined is engineering. So that's really what we're here to talk about tonight. We've done an engineered design for these 2 streets that we're going to review and discuss how it's going to help out speeding on the streets. The reason we do all this is for safety and Vision Zero. For anyone who may not know, Vision Zero is essentially imagining a world without traffic fatalities and deaths, injuries, and working to achieve that goal. Essentially, fundamentally, there's no goal that's acceptable higher than 0 deaths on our roadways. Where this fits into traffic calming and speeding specifically is this handy infographic here. So we know from national transportation studies that the faster a car is going, if it were, God forbid, to collide with a pedestrian or other vulnerable road user, the risk of dying goes way up the faster a car is going. So if we're able to get most people going that kind of 25-mile-an-hour speed, the chance of survival is quite high. I mean, it's still not great if 11% of people aren't surviving those, but it is substantially better than the 35, 45 miles an hour. So a lot of streets get selected because there's a measured speeding problem, and we're really seeking to reduce that as much as we can with the tools that we have. This is a program that is in really high demand. So when 14th and Greenwood were selected, there were over 500 applications in NDOT's database. This map off to the right of the slide, all of those purple lines are applications to the program. We did select quite a few for this last selection. Usually it's 25, but this time we chose 85. So we've got a lot of work on our plate. But we're excited that this many streets are being considered for traffic calming, and we're hoping it's an effective effort from NDOT's part. Um, there's a few things that the traffic calming program does, and there are all kinds of things that the traffic calming does not do. If at any point we run into one of those, I just want to make sure everyone is aware of Hub Nashville. It's a great resource for reporting and requesting just about anything from Nashville. A lot of those are transportation related things, but it could be from trash, litter, recycling, public safety, trees, you name it. A lot of times if something doesn't fall under the traffic calming program and we can't roll it into our project, we'll try to make a request to Hub just to make sure that that record has been kept, and things are at least in the system for consideration by other departments or other arms of NDOT. So this is a little bit of information about how Greenwood and 14th were chosen. Essentially, it's a data-driven process entirely. After a street applies, what we'll do is collect data on the speeds, the volumes. We'll do some GIS analysis to find out, how close are parks, how close are schools, what are the sidewalk conditions looking like, and all that rolls into this nice pie chart off to the right, to spit out a score that basically ranks all the streets in Nashville in a way that is as fair as possible, that we can think of anyway. You may notice the two biggest slices of that pie are speed and volume. That is the case because we essentially want to make sure we're selecting for danger, risk times, what is it, frequency equals danger. I guess I messed that up, but anyway, speeds and volumes are the things that get weighted most heavily because those are the things ultimately that lead to injuries, fatalities, other problems. So that's kind of all the general information on the traffic calming program. The next, all of the rest of the slides are going to pertain directly to the two projects that we have to talk about. But before I move on, I want to pause. Does anyone have questions, comments, concerns? Sounds like no, so we can keep just chugging along. So the two streets we're talking about tonight, as we know, are Greenwood Avenue from Gallatin Avenue to Chapel Ave, and then North 14th Street from Stratton Avenue to Greenwood Avenue. Those form a T, as many of you are aware. And basically, these are some of the data points that went into that score. You can see the 85th percentile speeds are both pretty high, definitely around that 35-mile-an-hour benchmark, which for the most part are speeds that are higher than folks want to have on their street. It's not always the most pleasant to be walking along the side of the road and have a car buzz by you at kind of 40, 35 miles an hour. Pretty good variety of street widths. So Greenwood is substantially wider than 14th. You all know that there's one row of parking, 2 lanes, and then 14th is about as narrow as they come at 21 feet. So that's just 2 lanes. If anyone is parked on the street, it's a bit of a nuisance or off to the side. So we've got a couple different solutions for each of those that we'll cover. Here's this slide again, basically just a map of what we're looking at. All of the purple lines are streets that have been applied for, and all of the green ones are ones that have been selected. If anyone's curious, this is a screenshot from NDOT's traffic calming tracker that's available online. We've got a QR code that'll bring you to their main landing page if anyone wants to see, but you can sort of check out your neighborhood or someone else's neighborhood and see what all is at least been applied for. I think they also show ones where it's been installed. Those would be like blue dotted lines. So if anyone isn't familiar with what speed cushions are are like out in the wild, they can find a street to go check them out. So now I'm going to kind of talk about the range of things that NDOT does, and then we'll sort of zero in on the design we sort of are thinking we have in mind for these two streets. First and foremost is speed cushions. This is by far the most common implementation that NDOT does through their traffic calming program. The main reason for that is they sort of check the box on a lot of different factors. They're physical solutions that are kind of agnostic to whether or not a person respects the speed limit or not. So like back in the day, if you wanted to lower speeds, you might just lower the speed limit and see what happens. We found that that is not quite a full solution to a speeding problem. So generally, like putting a physical item to more strongly suggest that one should be slowing down, or at least providing a little bit of discomfort if they choose not to, is preferred. They're only about 3 inches high, but that is kind of a standard national guidance. We use modular products. We're not like building all of these out of asphalt by hand. So it's a pretty regular program that most Nashvillians have been exposed to at this point. They do come in different lengths. So depending on the target speed, we may choose 7, 10.5, 14. Those really, the shorter ones are a little more targeting the lower speeds, and the longer ones are a little more comfortable if you were going faster. So if one of these was like a kind of really long or 30 miles an hour road, more suburban context, the 14 feet would be closely considered. I think for both of these, we sort of have 7 foot in mind as the ideal cushion selection. They don't go all the way across the road because we want to leave a little bit of room for emergency vehicles like fire trucks and ambulances to track their wheels directly over the cushion. With a really wide wheelbase like you have on those types of vehicles, the cushion doesn't slow them down as much as it would a smaller car like you or I would drive. Counter to that are speed tables. Those are basically just speed cushions that stretch all the way across the road. We have these available in the toolkit. They're definitely not preferred on roads that we suspect might be routes for things like fire trucks. In East Nashville, that could pretty much be anywhere unless you were like at the very end of a cul-de-sac or something like that. So we don't propose these a whole lot, but they are functionally the same as cushions, but just have a greater potential impact on something like a fire truck. So how do we know these do anything? In addition to national research that's happened all over the country since the late 1990s, NDOT has taken it upon themselves to study speed cushion implementations in Nashville. So this data is collected from 6 projects that have been installed with the 6x7 foot speed cushions, and we see some pretty encouraging news. Basically, the average speed goes down from 31 to 22. The 85th goes down from 37 to 25. For anyone who doesn't know, 85th it's like the median of a data set, but instead of 50%, it's 85. So 15% of people are driving faster than that number. That can be relevant when you have a high speed like 37. It's not even being like dragged up by really extreme speeding. That truly is just that percentile of people are going that speed. Kind of in the less frequently used category are radar feedback signs. We like to have these in our back pocket in case there are conditions that prevent us from using vertical measures like speed cushions and speed tables. This is Nashville, so it's very hilly. Sometimes we'll just have areas where you have a long stretch where the road is more than the grade threshold that cushions are allowed. So we don't propose these with every project. We certainly don't rely on them to do all of the work of traffic calming, but they are something that we pull out every now and again in situations to either supplement, or if cushions weren't able to be installed on a project, this might be a decent second choice. We can also do some narrowing. So if we had a really wide road that had lanes, nice and comfortable to go pretty fast on. One sort of psychological measure we can take is painting some white edge lines on the road to basically narrow that pavement down a bit and make it feel smaller. Again, these don't really physically affect cars, so there's nothing here that prevents anyone from going as fast as they would have otherwise. But it is something that research has shown does actually nudge speeds down a bit when implemented, and it can be effective also, when installed in conjunction with other things. Bulb outs and chicanes, these are also kind of a specialty item used in certain situations. The point of a bulb out is to take an intersection that's really wide, maybe easy to do a pretty fast right-hand or left-hand turn, and we kind of take the pavement and shrink it down as much as we can without really like incapacitating the intersection to do its job. Um, this picture on the left here is it's not an old picture, but it's from an earlier bulb out design. So we can talk about how the ones proposed for Greenwood are a little bit different than this. And then chicanes, that is a fancy word for, weaving left and right. So I think Fairfax is the example I bring up that's over near like Hillsborough Village. But essentially when a road is so wide that you can literally have it, wave side to side, that can help slow people down because you don't just have a straight shot to hit the gas. You're actually doing some maneuvering and um, hopefully being a little more careful as you drive down the road. And then traffic circles, these are implemented pretty rarely in Nashville, and the reason for that is we need to ensure that certain large vehicles are still able to make the turning movements that we like to have available for them. I will say none of the intersections that these streets touch are quite large enough to be good candidates for these. But there are some intersections that are just so massive, you can even do one of these without, impeding traffic. So that's it for the toolbox. Want to pause again to just sort of take any questions, comments, if anyone has, anything they want to ask. The next part is looking at our concept designs and sort of digging even further into the details.
What about crosswalks or even the crosswalk signs and the lights? Does that help? Is that part of the toolbox as well?
It is not. In terms of lights, if there are any that exist and are out, those can be reported to Hub or NES, and they should be taken care of pretty quickly. This program really doesn't have the tools to install like pedestrian lighting, for instance. Crosswalks, it's sort of a case-by-case basis. We definitely don't spend a lot of time like adding mid-block crossings, for instance. We can refresh like existing crosswalks that might exist, or stripe ones where there's a crossing already. There was one spot where we looked at sort of a mid-block one, but it wasn't looking like that would be a good solution here. And we can kind of talk about that when we're looking at the map as well.
Is a raised crosswalk or a flex post in the toolkit?
Flex posts are, so the bulb outs are usually the ones that get them. Raised crosswalks, they are technically in the toolkit online. So if you were to go to like NDOT's traffic calming website, you'll find a PDF with like, I think 10 different things that are in the toolbox. We found that those create a pretty tough installation timeline. So essentially what we've done is try to accomplish the calming that needs to happen for pedestrian safety with the modular speed cushions, because you don't have to break out the asphalt saw or the concrete truck and all those things that tend to make projects slow way down in time and go way up in cost. But certainly we do want to consider where people are walking as part of our design.
And did you mention, are stop signs in the list of tools available?
They are not. So stop signs are considered by MUTCD and by extension NDOT as like intersection control exclusively. There are even lines in our kind of engineering guidebooks that say, do not use stop signs as traffic calming. And there is a little bit of reasoning behind that I can elaborate on. Essentially, on streets where there are stop signs at places where people never encounter other cars to share the intersection with, that's where you see like non-compliance go up. So there are neighborhoods with too few stop signs for sure, but they also exist in a way where there are too many. Basically, we don't like to rely on the stop signs as the primary thing that it's preventing people from driving dangerously, because you are able to just sort of look at it and go by if you choose to. Not legally, of course. For anyone here, don't disobey stop signs, but it is sort of a hard line that NDOT takes, that they aren't used for anything besides controlling the flow of intersections.
But for things like where pedestrian access is important, like could it be, I mean, I know it might not be the best traffic calming tool, but in where we have intersections that don't have stop signs that people are crossing the street, it could be a good, I don't know, if pedestrian access is considered in traffic calming, I guess that might be my question.
Yeah, no, I understand. So NDOT will consider putting a stop sign in as a hub request. Basically, any intersection where a stop sign is requested gets a ticket, and an engineer who works for NDOT will basically evaluate based on the factors that go into such decisions, and basically, let you know if that is successful or not. The traffic calming program itself does not focus on them.
To that point, I guess one maybe good example of where a stop sign was approved. I was back when I was on council, but was able to work with NDOT to consider adding a stop sign at 14th, where Seymour and Franklin all come together. And part of the factors that were included was the amount of pedestrian traffic that was happening in addition to the vehicular. And it was also an offset intersection, and there were some visibility concerns too. So I have had cases where when I was on council, I was able to work with NDOT to include pedestrian crossings as a factor. It's just not usually the primary factor, but it can add to help maybe increase the score of an intersection if there's a lot going on generally, and if you're also having a lot of pedestrian crossings there.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, that's exactly right. Like I mentioned, there are sort of a few things that the traffic calming program tries to really zero in on, but there are other avenues to get a wider variety of things. I'll parrot Carrie Rogers' comment. Basically, the Traffic and Parking Commission also has authority to approve stop signs, speed limit reductions, things like that. So they can be a tool as well to help pursue some of these additional safety needs besides just physically slowing down cars. Y'all want to move on to the concept designs?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we'll do Greenwood first. I mean, we can take a look at both, but basically we're proposing 4 cushions and a set of bulb outs. The bulb outs is 14th, the end of the second project, so it'll affect both, but we're lumping it onto Greenwood. Essentially, yeah, speed cushions, we try to space them out somewhere in the neighborhood 300 to 500 feet. That's a range that is intended to be close enough together that people aren't just slowing down for the speed cushions and then getting back up to whatever speed they were going. But we don't want them so close together that we're having diminishing returns. So 4 is kind of the right number here. There's also a few guidelines about how close can they be to intersections. Driveways is one that can make it kind of tough. And then, anywhere where folks are stopping anyway at like a stop sign or, traffic signal, those have their own kind of defined buffer areas. I haven't drafted up the specifics of the bulb outs just yet, but I did take a pretty detailed look at it this afternoon. So we can sort of talk about like what we want those to look like, how they are geometry wise, if we'd like, but essentially they are white painted double line, reducing the lanes of each intersecting road to 10 feet. And then we're going to have like a radius connecting those of about 15 feet is our go-to. Those will have delineators around them, so it's not just the paint that's like visually tightening up the intersection. You'll actually be like running into the plastic flex posts if you were to try to drive in the bulb out. The thought there is just to help that kind of crossing movement feel a little safer. So if you were crossing Greenwood at 14th, for instance, you'd be able to go about 10 feet into the bulb out and then cross that extra 20 feet afterwards. I know it's not a crosswalk, but that is sort of what we can do. We entertained doing the crosswalk from 14th to Greenwood, like at that section of 14th. The main barrier there for this program is that Metro Nashville doesn't want to create pathways that aren't ADA compliant. So if you were to follow that crosswalk to get over to the northern side of Greenwood, you'd run into a curb basically. So until Metro can chop the sidewalk, ramp down, build like an ADA platform for their crosswalk to land on, they don't want to stripe the crosswalk and direct people into a situation that may not serve them. We will probably be able to stripe a crosswalk from the one side of 14th to the other. There are 2 ADA ramps there already, so we don't have that same issue there. And it, in my opinion, is always better to have a higher visibility of pedestrian paths where we can. And that's basically it. Any questions about Greenwood?
I have one.
Sure.
You say you're going to do a bulb out at 14th and Greenwood?
Yes.
The intersection's a little small, so how is that going to work? Are you going to squeeze the street down some more?
The vast majority of the squeezing will take place in the parking lane. So from north to south across Greenwood, you have 1 lane of traffic heading west, 1 lane of traffic heading east, and then there's a lane for parked cars separated by like a solid white line. We'll limit the pavement that's traversable throughout Greenwood to 20 feet. So 10 foot is kind of a happy middle ground in terms of lanes. I've seen as low as 9. They can go up to like 12. That's mainly for interstates. We really don't like to do that on neighborhood streets because it kind of induces speeding. So what we'll see is some white kind of pavement markings in that parking lane. And the other benefit of that is it prevents people from parking so close to the intersection that you're actually blocking the visibility of those who may be crossing 14th or crossing Greenwood from one side to the other.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
Looks like we've got a question from Lee.
I have my hand up. Can
Yep.
you guys hear me?
Yes.
The cushions you mentioned, the cushions and speed tables, sometimes like to accommodate first responders, emergency vehicles by kind of careening off to the side and maybe catching a flat wheel or something to that effect. With the the uncentering of Greenwood, I don't think we're going to be able to have that on the cushions traveling west. So that is a little bit of a concern I might have for some of the first responses to going back to Gallatin, which is, going east to get into the neighborhood is one thing, but you got to get back out. So my concern has always been that the experiment on the parking, in my personal opinion, on this block has been a failure just due to the lack of use and the fact that you're now only able to put this bulb on the south side. You couldn't get the bulb to also occur on the north side if the center of the street was back to where the center of the street is, and narrowing it like one of the traffic calming measures that you had pointed out. And from what I can tell, the cushions would be great, the bulb out would be great, but we could actually make better use of the cushions if it was centered, and the bulb out, we could actually get it on the 14th and 12th for all we know, just because we would have the room to do that. And I do think that does have a measurable, slow down effect, because I've seen it work on Douglas with those bulb outs. That works. All that was is those the paint and the pylons. But I would bet that has brought that down a lot. But we don't have that opportunity right now to take advantage of all of those things because the center line isn't in the center of the street at the moment. Just throwing that out there. Once and the silver the blue skies would be that one day we would actually just widen the sidewalks once pedestrian traffic is getting to where we think that would be available. But that's pie in the sky stuff that I would love to see, but not here to talk about today.
Yeah, that's interesting. So fill me in. I've been working on this project for not very long. These are pretty quick turnarounds, so I don't have the full history of like where all Greenwood has been in the past. It sounded like the parking is a relatively new addition.
It is. So in
Yeah.
as far back as the 1970s, the Public Works Department said that parking was not allowed on Greenwood until you got to the absolute end. And that was way back in the 70s. And it was so long ago that there are no minutes that reflect why they made that decision or whatnot. Greenwood also is a somewhat of a designated bikeway. When it was restriped, I want to say in 2014, they did not stripe it with bike lanes. And so what happened on Greenwood is that neighbors were parking on the street, all of which was illegal. And they were parking in a random pattern, which theoretically sounds good for traffic calming because it sounds like the chicanes that you talked about on Fairfax. But what was happening was that vehicles were not able to judge that appropriately. And so they were striking cars in the street, and there were a lot of incidents of that. And so so I worked with with Public Works or NDOT to say, do folks want to pick one side or the other where they would allow parking? And the preference was that people wanted the parking on the south side of the street. And so that is why, at least for that portion of it, NDOT shifted it over and created a parking lane. Also, because if again, to your point about wide lanes, if you have a 30-foot wide street, you have a center line down it. Each of those lanes is then 15 feet if there is not parking there, right? So that was, it was an experiment to try to narrow those lane widths and also permit parking that neighbors seem to want, but to pick one side of the street or the other. Now, when to everyone's chagrin, when you get down to Porter Road, you still have that condition where you actually do have parking on both sides of the street. And so, so at the end of the past summer, I was working with NDOT staff to take a look at it to see if they would consider it there. And, you know, kind of, again, to your point, working around driveways and things like that is always difficult.
Yeah.
And in particular, at the corner of Porter, you've got businesses that will have heavy deliveries where the delivery vehicles are pulling into the street, and so that is a reason why NDOT is very cautious about doing that there. Then you also have this middle portion of the street, which is super wide by the schools, right? And so you have these different configurations of Greenwood along the length of it. So this, what NDOT and the Traffic and Parking Commission approved a couple of years ago, was to create a restriping system where you shifted over the lanes to narrow the lanes, but also create a parking lane. And actually the thought at that time was that they had hoped that that would with traffic, but it hasn't quite. So.
I would say that it was very favorable for the people on the south side, but the people on the north side, that move has pretty much invalidated this sidewalk, which is concerning because everything going south on 12th, 14th, and even a little bit on Chapel, very poor sight lines for pedestrians, very poor sight lines for vehicles, and there will be an accident, a major accident on 12th in Greenwood very shortly. I have a camera out there, and there's about 7 or 8 close calls every single day, and it's all because of the sight lines being shifted further north. People are going 40 miles an hour down, and you can very, very easily just tap those cars as you're walking on that sidewalk. Brett, to your thought, it makes sense to have that single side parking closer to Porter where you really don't have enough for 2 lanes. I'm still passionate about being able to give back the road to non-vehicles, not parking, not driving, but to give it back to those chicanes and those bulbs, as well as some use of those emergency vehicles that could use that. It is a safer condition, and it would also reduce speeds. And that's where it is. That's where we always.
One of the interesting things about serving on Metro Council or in a Metro department is that sometimes you have to pick one side or the other, and that we had a public process for that in Eastwood, and the process was that the preference was on the south side. One of the challenges about the chicane version is that the street does have that bend in the middle of it, right around 14th. There are a number of reasons why that is a little bit challenging, where if the street were a straight shot, it wouldn't be. But I think here the hope is that rather than restriping the street again, that we continue to try to make improvements, and that if traffic speed cushions or things of that nature can help, then hopefully that will reduce those speeds a little bit.
I will just add that the on-street parking on the south side is heavily used east of 14th, between 14th and Chapel. I can't speak for west of there, but I live on the 1400 block, and it's used heavily along our stretch. And I was just going to ask if maybe we could see the plan for 14th, and then come back and with the picking apart the plans. Some of us have got limited time, and I just kind of like to see what the rest of this looks like.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. We'll move on to 14th right now, and then we'll save any like further discussion on Greenwood for after that. 14th is a little simpler. Like I mentioned earlier, the limits are from Stratton Avenue to Greenwood, and I guess I'll just orient ourselves. We've rotated 90 degrees, so Greenwood is off to the right, north is to the right, and yeah, basically using the same speed cushion spacing parameters to choose these spots. Much more so than Greenwood, 14th is really constrained by some hills. So it's not like the hilliest street in Nashville, but there are enough areas that edge past that grade threshold that the locations we were able to find are pretty much threading the needle on a few different things. But 6 is sort of the number that we landed on. Generally, the protocol is to do one per block at minimum. So the most tight one is that one between Stratton and Eastland there. But we're hoping those 4 in between Seymour and Greenwood should lower speeds enough that it is, a more comfortable road to travel on if you're walking, biking, or driving, really. We don't have any bulb outs proposed here. Essentially, the thinking is that because it's 21 feet, you'd only be bulbing in like a foot. That generally isn't changing much relative to a street that's a little wider like Greenwood. But certainly, just like Greenwood, I'm happy to take any questions, comments, and think about any specific concerns.
This is Brett. Can y'all hear? David, this is Brent. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Sorry, yeah, I was having trouble earlier. Okay, I live actually on Sharp Avenue, but closer to 14th, I guess, maybe than Greenwood. And just had a question. Does NDOT have any data on like what happens to traffic? Like, is there basically bailout traffic or some impact on neighboring streets when certain streets get calmed? Do the uncalmed streets nearby get more traffic as a result of people trying to avoid the irritation, the discomfort you were talking about?
That's a great question. Certainly, it's not unheard of. We definitely don't have data to suggest that it's like a major problem. Nationally, it's been studied kind of how volumes might go down. And the most recent data to that effect shows that volumes on the streets being studied really only decreases by about 10%. So should all those people choose like Gallatin, for instance, that would be the, like the best case scenario. I'd be kind of surprised if the Seymours and Granadas and Sharps saw like a huge increase, just because you have to experience the traffic calming to even get to them. All that being said, I want to just kind of confirm that our goal is not to move any traffic around. It's simply to take traffic that exists and lower the speeds. That's generally why we only choose like neighborhood streets. So if there are arterials nearby, presumably that would be a more attractive option. But yeah, essentially what we want is for cars to just drive safely, not make other decisions on how they get around.
This is Brett with us. I live on Granada, and I always tell people that they're welcome to come sit on my porch and see the speeding that happens on my little 1-block street to and from the gas station. So I know that we do have some of my neighbors did submit a traffic application for Granada for that reason, but I personally am hoping that this helps somewhat, because like you say, sometimes folks do take some of these streets like 14th currently as a way of bypassing Gallatin in particular, and so maybe this will help keep that real through traffic onto Gallatin where it belongs.
So I've got a question. Well, I have 2 questions now. Joe, you had your hand up first, and then we can move on to Eric.
Yeah, I was just this is actually for the still on Greenwood, but the comment was that the 12th Street and Greenwood intersection really needs the bulb out to daylight the intersection, because I bike through there all the time, like almost daily purpose. And the people that undercuts that intersection, it makes it very dangerous on bike and on
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind clarifying a little bit, by undercutting, they're coming like from 12th and going on
From
to
Greenwood
Greenwood
to 12, yeah. Because
okay.
12 is actually quite wide for a side street. And when they do that turn from coming from the Publix in onto 12, they will almost every time they undercut it.
Oh, I see.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Certainly, there's
Yeah.
nothing that says we can't put bulb outs on Greenwood and 12th. So we'll take a look at that as we refine our design. Eric?
Yeah, and I was just gonna kind of talk about maybe the need for bulb outs on this section, because especially at the Seymour stop sign, there's the neighbor on the south. Let's see, the northwest corner of the Seymour stop sign. The neighbor has a big shrub right on the corner. There's also a big hill that goes down. I often walk north to sort of the 5 Points area, and so when you're approaching as a pedestrian, the cars coming from Kroger don't really see you that well. So I would, if there's room for bulb outs, especially at that Seymour, only even if there's only one, I feel like it would be helpful on the north west corner of the Seymour stop sign. And then we have a crosswalk at Sharp Avenue, and I know that it's kind of at the bottom of the hill. Might not be a strong case for a stop sign or a bulb out, but we often use that crosswalk too. And I would just advocate for any sort of improvement, even if it's a small bulb out, in addition to the crosswalk on Sharp.
Yeah, and then I'm adding to that on Sharp there are a lot of retired citizens that don't drive, and they use that to walk to Kroger for the daily grocery trips too. So that crossing needs to be addressed.
This is the crossing at Sharp and 14th.
Correct, because it's on the bottom of the hill, so it's actually pretty fast coming down too.
Yeah. So what we can see here is these two cushions, like this one and this one, are sort of what we could do to address that. And essentially, what's going on is you have the hill, and then as soon as it flattens out enough below that, I guess I should say the threshold is 6%. If it's 6% or less, we'll put a cushion there. If it's higher than that, we're getting close to where the warranty of the cushion's invalidated, and that's something Metro, can't do. So we are hoping that by having that cushion kind of at the bottom of those hills, if you were to start picking up speed unintentionally, you'll have that reminder like, hey, jolt, slow down a little bit. I'm happy to take a look at bulb outs there as well if it looks like it'll be a good use of paint and delineators to sort of highlight that crosswalk. Joe, you've got your hand up. Is that a second question?
Oh no, sorry, I haven't put my hand down yet.
No worries. Got one from Cliff.
Yeah, and I may be getting ahead of you. I'm sorry if I am. I'm just curious. What's the timeline like on this? I know that there's a voting process and all that, but could you give us some indication of that, please?
Yeah. I guess this would be a good kind of last call for what we're looking at here. Certainly after the presentation, we can hang out as long as we need. But I can also just jump straight into next steps, timeline, all that. Getting some head nods. So here is the timeline. Basically, as we sort of covered, there's an application, prioritization, and selection. Whenever that, we are the big red circle, so neighborhood traffic calming meeting. Everyone was invited through the mail. Next, we're going to kind of take the feedback we're receiving here and generate a set of construction plans, one for each of these streets. And those will show kind of the specifics of like where exactly cushions are going to the foot, what exactly do these bulb outs look like, kind of what the plan is. And then we can go one of two ways. We can either have a second neighborhood meeting, so kind of do the whole scheduling process again, talk about the construction plans, sort of more closely like review what we're doing. On simple, kind of straightforward projects, what we can also do is just if everyone is wanting to move things along, we could just go straight to balloting. So essentially what that looks like is the plans are posted online, then everyone gets their postcard in the mail, checks out the plans and votes yay or nay. There are like some pretty approximate months timelines here. The biggest one is construction. That's 8 to 10 months. Essentially, NDOT has a pretty massive queue of projects that have been designed, voted on, passed, but still need to be built. So it doesn't take 10 months to like do a project, but it will be about that timeline to get through all of the projects that are before you all in line. This is kind of the time when we as a group like discuss and sort of decide, does anyone want to have a second meeting? That threshold is pretty low. Like literally, if anyone wants to have a second meeting, we'll have one. But if the group is generally just wanting to move ahead, see the plans, vote on what we come up with, we're just as happy to do that as well. Got a question from Lee.
Would a second neighborhood meeting have any detailed information from Kimberly Horn on this?
Yeah, so it'll look a lot like this meeting, but instead of these concepts, it'll be like 5 or 6 pages of plans. So they'll zoom in more.
Street cross section. I mean, street cross section is really kind of what I was inquiring about.
Oh.
Would it have anything like that?
Yeah, basically. I will say we're probably not looking to restripe the road, like moving the center line, moving those edge lines. So for our Greenwood design, in all likelihood, we'll leave that the same. And a good time to reconsider it would be like when it's time to repave Greenwood. That's usually when NDOT likes to kind of zoom way out and take a look at what do we really want this full street to be. Whereas here we're more looking to install like quick build type items that'll slow down speeds in the near term. But yes, you would be able to see the cross section for that. When is Greenwood scheduled for repaving? I can confidently say I have no idea.
It's not scheduled anytime soon. It was repaved in about 2014. So the pavement is relatively new from that rebuild. So probably 10 years or more, I would imagine.
Yeah. Thank you, Brett.
But when was it restriped? I'd like to have that recorded too.
The center line that was done maybe 2020. Yeah, maybe 2020 or something. Yeah. The Porter Road restriping project was in 2019 when that was done. And so there was a lot of work, especially done at that intersection. And actually, that was one of the things that we brought up was would they consider shifting the lines over there at Porter at that time, and they would not. But they went ahead and did most of Porter, including that bulb out at Greenwood and Porter. And then the restriping that NDOT was willing to consider was after that. So I would imagine 2020, about somewhere in there.
I'd like to understand if there's a bulb out that's proposed either at the east side of 14th and Greenwood, the east T intersection, or at 12th in Greenwood. I'd like to know how those were done. So if that needs a second neighborhood meeting, I'd like to get a second neighborhood meeting.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. We can definitely, and this is for Greenwood. I guess I should say we don't have to keep these two lumped together like after tonight. I'll happily have a meeting for one and not the other if the different groups prefer that way. But do we that's a yes on the Greenwood section for a meeting number 2.
I would suggest doing both. Yeah, I think so, because I know 14th has been one for which there's been a lot of requests for traffic calming for many, many years. And partly it's because of that hilly condition, the width varies a lot. So I would recommend pairing them together. And it sounds like, I do think that question that Lee's raised about what potential can be done for 12th and Greenwood as well as 14th is good. It sounds like maybe also revisiting Sharp and 14th and Seymour and 14th to maybe tweak those a little bit more might be beneficial too.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like let's just do another joint meeting for both of these streets. Number two, I tend to agree. Whenever we like sort of change the design a little bit, it's totally fine to have that second one just to review our work and talk about it some more. So we'll pencil that in, get it scheduled pretty soon here, and then have it on all of our calendars. After that, for anyone who doesn't know, is balloting. Basically, all these traffic calming projects, the vertical measures, speed cushions, tables, etc., are subject to a vote. So everyone with a parcel of property abutting one of those two streets will get a ballot postcard in the mail with a unique code that they then go online, submit a vote, yes or no, to approve the project if 2/3 of neighbors are favorable. And then after that, if it passes, the project moves forward and eventually gets installed. This information is mainly for if we were going straight to ballot. I know that we've spent a good amount of time talking already, so I'm kind of going to gloss over this since we'll cover it again in more depth in that second meeting, like right before balloting. But if anyone has questions, feel free to just kind of let me know after the meeting and we can discuss. But this sort of just goes into like how all that works, nuts and bolts. And here we are at the end of the meeting. I'm happy to stay on as long as anyone would like to answer any questions, talk about more of what we've discussed. Just kind of the floor is open to whoever.
Before that, David, I just want to say thank you for facilitating, and thanks everybody for being here and giving your feedback. And I'm looking forward to seeing the discussion as it develops and also what the detailed designs come back for the second meeting.
Of course. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, David. Bye.
All right. Y'all have a good night.
Hey, David, this is Brent again. So for follow-up, I was actually the point of contact on this application, as it turns out. Although I think I was actually the point of contact on the more recent application, but got added to maybe the original application for 14th and Greenwood because, my application included those streets also that I submitted a few years ago. Anyway, point is for the follow-up meeting and the communication around this, I'm happy to, continue to be, I guess, to the extent is needed or helpful to have a neighborhood, point of contact and a reference. But I know you all for this meeting ended up sending out these cards to set up the virtual meeting with the link and everything. Is that basically what will happen now? It's sort of that more targeted, postcard invitation. And then I guess other neighbors we could forward the link to if they are interested.
Yes. So we will, and actually this slide is pretty good. We draw this mailing list shape and send mail to everyone who owns those properties. That's basically just like a tool that Metro has. It's sort of the only information we work with is what's available through Parcel Viewer to get a hold of people. So they'll all get mail, but it may not be to that house. So if anyone was like renting, but the owner of the house lived elsewhere, the owner of that is the address we have on file. So I guess to answer your question, we'll send out mail, but it is probably also helpful to communicate to your neighbors if there's like a neighborhood association group, stuff like that. We welcome, kind of any publicity that folks want to do. We will probably, if you're the applicant, rely on you to coordinate a good date. So similar to before, basically you'll have access to my calendar and can choose like any night that's not already picked or not on like a council meeting night. There's a few other like reasons we'll block off a day, but generally you'll just sort of have a list of slots to choose from, and then we'll get the meeting scheduled.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thanks, Brent, for helping get this scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah, no, and the holidays certainly kind of interfered with my communication a little bit, and sorry I wasn't more responsive to get it on the calendar before the holidays, but looks like we had a pretty decent turnout all the same. Those postcards, I'm sure, were helpful.
Good.
David, sorry, I just have a quick question, but I wanted to clarify if are chicanes off the table for Greenwood because of the bend in the section we're looking at? Is that what I heard, kind of?
That was new information to me. I wasn't really aware of the whole like design history of how that got restriped. I will say we try not to do things in the traffic calming program that take parking spaces that someone currently has and removes them. And basically the reason for that is that these projects can be susceptible to getting killed if even a few neighbors are like really upset about it. There was one in my neighborhood where like literally we put a delineator in front of a person's house and they were so averse that they like harassed our council member to the point where NDOT had to go and remove it. So chicanes, while I do like them and they wouldn't be a terrible treatment here, the fact that there was kind of already a deliberate decision-making process that happened for the parking that's there already, and it wasn't so long ago that the frameworks have fully changed. It's not something that we're gonna like really come out with our first option as doing.
Yeah. So you would need
between Gallatin and 14th, just between Gallatin and 14th, if we had unanimous, if I got a letter from every person on the south side, and I'm being very serious about this, from 14th, just from 14th, I realize from 14th to Chapel, there's a lot of people who like that option, but from Gallatin to 14th, if I got a unanimous, all of those individual owners, if I got all of them to say that they don't care for the parking, could that open that up as a discussion, at least for 12th, and maybe for the right side of 14th?
I definitely do not want to make you do that. If
if you can't tell, I'm very passionate. I have two daughters who are on. We don't go in our front yard anymore because of this, and I'm being very, very, very serious about this. I can speak for the people on the north, just on the north side of this stretch, that people are bombing down to get to Gallatin. And I realize Greenwood's a long street. There's a lot of different peculiarities, but I would tell you that the centerline striping between Gallatin and 14th is difficult, not only because of some of the things that I mentioned, but there's also a no parking sign out in front of the new development. So it also sends terribly mixed messages. So maybe we have an opportunity to maybe strike that line at 14th to say everything east of here is doing this and everything west of here is doing this, and also get all the benefits that we want out of a safer street and a traffic calming street.
Hey,
maybe I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lee, it's Kate O'Neill. Are you saying that
Hey, Tate.
Hey, are you saying that you're in support of removing parking on Greenwood?
Yes.
All parking?
No, I want it where I find it being the most troublesome. The most troublesome is 14th going towards Gallatin, there's bad sight lines. It creates peculiar pedestrian abnormalities there. So that's
Gotcha.
that's what I'm concerned about.
Okay.
Greenwood actually opens up a little bit more as it gets closer to Chapel. So I'm not willing to maybe even fight that fight, but I will tell you that from 14th all the way west has the sidewalk on the north side has been completely invalidated. And if you don't believe me, just go walk it.
Oh,
Just go walk it on a. Yeah,
I believe you.
It is.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
It is tough because people are going 40 miles an hour, and I'm telling you, if I tripped and fell out into the street to an oncoming car, gone, done.
Yeah.
But I think before then we're going to have a major accident at 12th, and that's mostly because there's some shrubs that are blocking your sight lines, which used to not be a problem because people would heat out into it. But it's not just 12th. I mean, everybody has driveways that have been their sight lines are compromised by trees, by 100-year-old fences and stuff like that. So I'm trying to maybe I'm trying to pick my battles, but I can tell you that it's a dangerous situation the closer you get to Gallatin.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you at all. I think that, obviously there's some issues that hopefully this program will help us with, but I do know that parking is an asset for a lot of people between 14th and Chapel.
I can believe
I'll
that.
go ahead.
I can
I'll
totally
go
believe
ahead
that.
and chime in. So it's not necessarily that we would have to do chicanes on the whole street. It sounds like I should definitely look into some sort of chicaning between Gallatin and 14th, and that I will do. The other thing to consider is with chicanes, you don't remove all parking. It's really just the parking where you are turning. So kind of you go straight for a bit and then switch to the other side of the road, then go straight again. In those straight shots, there's still going to be the same amount of room for a parking lane. It's just not the full stretch like you have currently. But it sounds like, and actually I do remember this from when I went out and walked there. There is kind of that weird no parking sign in front of those townhomes.
There's a big tree. And there's a big tree in front of them. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like we put those signs up because that was kind of the deal that we worked out with, the Turnberry folks. So then we have these big no parking signs where it's actually the widest part of of Greenwood. And then just after that, when all the driveways start, then you could park there. And I think the thought was that would start to be populated by people that are going closer to Gallatin, and what it mostly is for residents. And again, I'm not opposed to that. What I am opposed to is making unsafe conditions on the street that don't help traffic calming, that because of parking. Anyway, that's what I'm against.
I totally understand. I guess if you don't mind, if you are motivated to talk to your neighbors along that stretch and maybe just kind of figure out if anyone would be super opposed to any amount less parking, that would probably be helpful for NDOT and their decision making. Basically, what I'm going to do is sort of recap this meeting with the rest of the team and kind of decide which of these things are we going to pursue really hard, what are we going to kind of look at more closely. That would be likely helpful information, if you knocked on some doors and generally got favorable responses. I just want to caution against removing parking in a way that might make someone so upset that they go and get everyone they know to vote no on this thing, when that's really the result that we want to try to avoid.
I'll put it this way: if one person wants to keep that terrible parking, I'll leave it. You know, I mean, I
Well, you
will. I
don't
mean,
call me terrible. Come on.
no, I will tell you that the parking on 14th to Gallatin is terrible because it's confusing and from 14th headed west, all that parking. That parking is terrible. Terrible sight lines for people going north is terrible, and yet the fact that everybody is coming in from Publix doesn't know that you can't. I guess you can't park there because it says there's no parking, but then all of a sudden you can. And if you look at it, there's every single one of those houses has a driveway that spits out onto Greenwood, with the exception of the one on the corner of 14th and in Greenwood, which has their driveway off of 14th. So they may be they may be my holdout, and I could understand that, and I would leave it alone if that was the case. But I mean, I got to tell you, if somebody is parking out in front of my driveway, I don't know. All these people have plenty of parking, is what I would tell you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're not wrong about 14th to Gallatin, because I don't know that we see a ton of cars parked there anyway, but we do see a ton of cars parked from 14th to Chapel. So if parking was removed there, I think that there would be a lot
I would go further, Kate. I would say 14th all the way to Porter might need it. I mean, and because if you go closer to Porter, people are parking on both sides and everyone's packed in. Totally get it. I totally get it. But Greenwood is kind of this weird through street that might need to be as malleable as it possibly can. And right now we're adding, potential of adding these cushions, which, by the way, I love. This is, I mean, if I had to accept this as is, absolutely, I would take what is being presented here in a heartbeat to calm things down.
Yes.
And I'm not going to poison the well because I don't get everything I want. This is now the time to make everything as best as it can, because we're not going to get another shot at this, it sounds like, for a while.
Yeah.
So I appreciate y'all listening to me pontificate, but I'm really passionate about this one little section, because I really do. I have video footage of countless hundreds of very, very close calls on 12th in Greenwood, and I'll tell you how I have my video set up. Listen for a car horn. That's my only trigger to start recording. Listen for a car horn, and I'm telling you, it's hundreds.
Lee, do you know Chris? So, you should connect with Chris.
Do I know Chris? Chris.
14th and Greenwood, across the street. The one who's fenced, or he's not at the intersection, but he's
on the north side. He's on the north side that somebody crashed into. Yeah, no, I don't know Chris. I've had people ask that too.
You should connect with him. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I should knock on his door, because if there's anything that I should connect with him.
Yes. You would find another passionate person. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, good. We'll be buddies. If we don't get everything we want, at least we can be buddies. That's right. Yeah. But we have this opportunity right now at the intersection at 14th, where we have a bulb out. Then everything to the east of it can have as many parking spaces as they want out there, and maybe that makes more sense. So, I've gone as far. I'll just go ahead and tell you, I've gone as far to do I've done a 3D scan of everything from Gallatin all the way to 14th. And Greenwood actually does vary in width. That's the other weird thing. Several times, you actually have a little bit more room as you get further away, and then it's weird. It goes in and out several times within that space. But I believe closer towards you, Kate, it starts to widen a little bit, which is nice, because that means you have a lot of opportunity to help with a number of different traffic calming and safety features down that stretch. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Cool. Well, thank you for your input. Just to reaffirm, I will be checking into chicanes 14th to Gallatin. And then right up on the screen, I've got my contact information. So NDOT TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov, that goes to kind of the pool of engineers that handle those from NDOT. But I'm also happy to help or take questions afterwards, or if you were to find out more information about how people on that stretch feel about parking, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Happy to keep working on this as we get that second meeting scheduled. Let's see, I'm gonna just take a quick look at the chat and see if we had any other questions. Yeah, definitely. I will affirm that people driving on Greenwood right now are going super fast. I've had that same experience. You're walking on the 5-foot sidewalk with the telephone pole right in the center, no landscape strip, and someone blows by you in the SUV. Not fun. Can definitely see how it, will go wrong someday if left untreated. We really hope that the cushion approach, along with the bulb outs we're going to explore, will have that same effect we've observed on other streets, like slowing those speeds down. But yeah, I just want to affirm that, agreed, it's not a comfortable pedestrian environment at the moment. Any other final thoughts? Like I said, I'm happy to hang out and discuss, but don't want to take up too much of anyone's time.
Appreciate everybody that's on here, and Clay Cap, thank you for representing us and listening into us vent. So appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all, and I appreciated everybody said today, and thanks for being here and giving your feedback on this.
All right, I'm out of here. Kate, we can talk later if we need to. Let me know if you need anything from me.
Not opposed to you, Lee, but we'll talk. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, David.